Welcome to Hogle Home Safari. My name is Angelina and I am part of the Education Department here at Utah's Hogle Zoo. Today, we are going to be learning about my favorite adaptation, and that is bird beaks. Bird beaks are so cool. Every kind of bird has a bird beak that is specially made to do exactly what that bird needs to do. It also helps that they're pretty easy to see, so we can make observations about them pretty easy. In order to learn more about bird beaks, we'll also be doing an activity together. To do this activity, you're going to need a few different materials. You're going to need a pine cone, string, a Ziploc bag, birdseed, something sticky that's safe to eat. I'm using something called suet, but you could also use Crisco or peanut butter, whatever is safe for you and a bird to eat that is sticky. This activity can also be messy, so I have some newspaper that we'll be using to protect my table, but you can also do it outside where it's easier to clean up. At the end of this activity, we will also need a pen or pencil and a paper. Now, I have a paper that I have with this video, but you are welcome to use just a plain piece of paper or a notebook paper as well. If you need to pause this video to grab your materials, go ahead and do so. You can pause at any time and start again when you're ready. Now, let's start talking about bird beaks. Bird beaks are fascinating. And as I said, every kind of species has a beak that is specially made to do exactly what it needs to do. But there are some patterns that can be seen with different kinds of bird beaks. Birds that eat similar things tend to have beaks that are shaped the same, at least if they're eating that thing the same way. So when I talk about bird beaks, a lot of people bring up the beaks that you might find on a bird of prey. A bird that eats meat, like an owl or an eagle. And they have beaks that have a curve to them, and they're also very sharp. So I have a model of a great horned owl skull. Great horned owls are owls that are large that live here in Utah. And you can see that black part of the skull. It's curved and it's sharp. So owls are raptors, which isn't just a dinosaur. It is a bird that catches its food with its feet and then tears it apart with its beak. So they have to have these really sharp curved beaks in order to tear the pieces of meat off so they can eat it. Sometimes it's easier for me to think about how adaptations work if I can think about a way that people might use something similar. So your beaks that might belong to an owl, an eagle, or a hawk, all of those curved beak raptors, their beaks kind of work like scissors. So that would be like if you had scissors and you were tearing chunks of Play-Doh off, and the parts that you cut off, that's what you're eating. So that is how their bird beaks work. Of course, not all birds that eat meat eat it the same way. Heron are birds that have beaks that are very different. So this is a model of a heron skull, and you can see that its beak is not short and curved. It is very long and skinny, and it's made to get food very differently than how an owl does. Heron do not catch their food with their feet. Instead, they wait very still and very quiet. And they wait for their food to come along, and when it does, they move very fast, and they catch it with their beak and they swallow it whole. So even though both the owl and the heron eat meat, because they eat their food differently, their beaks look different. For an example on how heron beak work, that'd be like if we had chopsticks, because they have about the same build. They are skinny and they're long. And you use them to try to catch your favorite candy. I have a whole bunch of little fish candies, like Swedish fish in here, and that kind of represents the food that a heron might try to get. And you'd wait patiently, you'd try to hold so still, be so quiet so you didn't spook it, and you pick it up and you grab your favorite piece and then you swallow it on down. That is how a heron's beak works. So pretty different than the owl beak. Of course, I'm sure you know that not all birds eat meat. Some birds eat plants. An example of that are geese and ducks. They like to eat plants that live along the water or in the water of where they live. So I have a model of a goose skull, and if you open the skull or open the beaks, you can see they have these ridges and grooves on the inside. And those ridges and grooves are really neat. So they actually help it so they can catch the plants that they're eating, hold on to it, and push any extra water out that they don't want, which is a nice adaptation for them to have. But it looks very different on the inside and on the outside than either the heron or the owl. Their beak kind of works like a strainer does. So I have some water and tea leaves in here, and if I scooped up some water, you can see the water comes out, and all that's left inside is the tea leaves. And that's kind of how the beak of a goose or a duck works. Of course, there are many other kinds of bird beaks that we're not talking about right now. I'm sure you can tell me some that I'm not mentioning. Now, even though we can't talk about all the bird beaks today, I do have a question for us. And that question is, what bird beaks might we see on the birds that live in our neighborhood? In order to solve this question, we're going to be doing an activity. We're going to be making a bird feeder. If you have a bird feeder already, awesome. You can fast forward till you see me holding my clipboard later on. If you want to make a bird feeder with us, make sure you have your supplies because we are going to get started. So to make your bird feeder, again, this can be a little messy. You might need help from a parent, and you might need to make sure you either do it outside or have a way to clean up. So I'm going to make sure that my table is nice and protected. I'm going to put some newspaper out just to make sure that it is easier for me to clean up after. So now that I have my newspaper down, I'm going to take my pine cone and I'm going to take some string. The string can be a tricky part of this activity because you want to have enough string you can tie it around your pine cone a couple of times, but also have enough to tie it around a branch and have it dangle down. So you don't want to give yourself too little string for this, but you also don't want too much. You don't want your bird feeder to hit the ground when you hold it up. So finding that nice middle ground can be a little tricky. You're going to cut your string. You're going to take your string and you're going to tie it around your pine cone a couple times. Sometimes it works better if you start kind of in the middle of your string and wrap it around your pine cone a couple of times. It can be a little tricky to find out the best way to keep it so your pine cone stays nice and secure. You don't want it to fall off the string, and that can be tricky when it's round, but I'm sure you can do it. When you get to, so it's wrapped around, you're going to wrap a knot, and you're going to pull that knot nice and tight to the pine cone. Tie it again just to make sure it is nice and secure. So you can see my pine cone stays on the string, and there's enough string I can tie it onto something later. Now this next part is where it gets messy. It's easiest to do this next part with your hands. If you use a knife or a spoon, it can be difficult. So if you have gloves and you don't want to get dirty, you can use them. But again, you can wash your hands after, and that's usually a good idea. So I'm going to take our suet. Our suet is kind of hard, and so it comes off in little pieces. So I'm going to break some pieces, and I have learned that this works better if I kind of slide it between the gaps in the pine cone. But if you're using something else, it might work better to slide it on top of the parts of the pine cone. You're going to have to play around with it and figure out what works best. It is also important to make sure you are careful and gentle because you don't want to break your pine cone, and the pine cones can be a little bit fragile. This part can take a little bit. It can also be difficult. It is okay if you need some help. But once you feel like you got that pretty covered in your sticky stuff, you're going to go ahead and you're going to put your pine cone in the Ziploc bag. So you're going to open your bag, put the pine cone in, make sure the string goes in as well so you can close the bag up nice and tight later. You're going to take a scoop of birdseed. You can use a handful, you can use a cup, whatever you have. You don't need a ton of it. And you're going to put it in. You're going to zip up your Ziploc baggie. Make sure you do it up nice and tight. And you're going to shake it around a little bit. Once you feel like your bird feeder is covered in birdseed, take it outside and hang it up in the tree. Please don't take this out of the bag before you're outside. It will be messy. And once you take it out, please make sure you throw it away and don't leave it on the ground. Don't let it blow away. Now, that comes to the next part of our activity, so we can figure out our question of what kind of bird beaks we see in our own neighborhoods. Now, we're going to be making observations. So we're going to take a piece of paper. It can be a blank paper, it can be notebook paper, it can be the handout that I have. Whatever you have is going to work just fine. Now, to make observations of birds, I have some tips, because it can be a little tricky. Biggest tip I have is to make sure that you remember every time you're outside, you're in a habitat. A habitat is an animal's home, so you need to make sure that every time you're outside, you are being a good house guest. For a bird, a good house guest is someone that is quiet, calm, and still. It also can take a lot of time for a bird to come. Birds can get scared easy, so you're going to have to also be patient. As you see birds coming to your bird feeder, you're going to write about them. Write about their size, the color, what shape their bird beak is, and see if you can figure any patterns of the kind of bird beaks that you see coming to your bird feeder. If you would like to have some help identifying the kind of birds that come to your bird feeder, because sometimes it's really fun to know exactly what species are visiting, you can visit the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Ornithology means the study of birds, and they have a really cool app. And you can put the information that you write down in, and it'll help you figure out what kind of birds you are seeing. But before you use or download any app, make sure you talk to a parent first. Now, I hope you had fun with us learning about adaptations, bird beaks, and some of the wildlife we might see in our own backyard. I hope you join us again at Hogle Home Safari.